Hello, welcome to Train Signal. This is the lab setup lesson in the Windows 7 Administration Training course. In this lesson, you're going to learn all about the GlobalMantix corporate network and what it looks like. GlobalMantix is the name of the company that we'll be using throughout this course as part of the course scenario. You'll learn much more about GlobalMantix and its needs around Windows 7 in the course scenario video in this course. You'll get a look in this lesson at the locations that are in use by GlobalMantix, and then we're going to drill down to three specific locations: headquarters, a single large regional office, and a single small regional office. And you're going to get a look at the network details for each of those locations. GlobalMantix has selected a large and small regional office to act as a pilot for a Windows 7 deployment. So we've chosen two for a lab in this course that we'll also focus on. You'll get a look at the GlobalMantix network diagram, a logical view of what the GlobalMantix network looks like. And then we'll go over a lab overview. This is going to be a look at what I'm actually using in this course to show you how to use Windows 7. You'll get a look at my hardware, the software that I'm using, and then you're going to get a look at the network diagram that makes it all work. The GlobalMantix Windows 7 implementation team is going to focus on creating deployment templates for one of each location type that the company has. The company is broken down into basically four types of units. Headquarters, which is a unique unit, is located in Columbia, Missouri. The large regional office template that we're going to create is based on the Southwest office located in Scottsdale, Arizona. The small regional office template will be based on the Northeast office that's located in Utica, New York. We won't be going into too much detail about mobile workers in this lesson, but we'll be talking about them in depth in other lessons in this course. Suffice it to say for now, however, mobile workers are a key part of the GlobalMantix strategy. As you can see from the map on your screen, GlobalMantix does have a number of locations. They're headquartered in Columbia, Missouri. Southwest office is Scottsdale, Arizona, as we said before. Northeast office is in Utica, New York, but they have other large regional offices that operate from Miami, Florida, Dallas, Texas, Germantown, Maryland, and Seattle, Washington. What you don't see on the map are the other locations that are operated by GlobalMantix. GlobalMantix did not place all of their individual small regional offices on this map, just the Northeast office located in Utica, New York, because they're going to be a pilot site for the Windows 7 implementation. Each type of GlobalMantix office has a specific naming convention for the machines that exist at a particular site. For example, headquarters uses the naming convention of GM for GlobalMantix - server role for its servers. So for its file server, the GlobalMantix name would be GM-file. The network details for headquarters are as follows. The IP address range into which all machines at headquarters will fall is 172.16.5.1 through 5.254. The subnet mask is a 24-bit subnet mask at 255.255.255.0. The gateway device used at headquarters is just a firewall router combination, and its IP address is 172.16.5.254. The DNS server is 172.16.5.1. For GlobalMantix, the DNS server role also runs on the domain controller, so the server name GM-DC doubles as the DNS server for headquarters. For large regional offices, the naming convention is as such. For the Southwest Regional Office file server, we have GlobalMantix-Southwest-File. Each large regional office has its own 2-digit code. Network details for the Scottsdale, Arizona large regional office are almost identical to the ones for headquarters, except they're using the .6.1 through .6.254 IP address range rather than the .5.1 through 5.254. The subnet mask is the same, and the gateway address, as you would expect with a different IP address range, is different at 172.16.6.254. The Scottsdale office, like all large regional offices, has its own DNS server as well, and that IP address is 172.16.6.1. Small regional offices, such as the Northeast Regional Office, do not have dedicated servers, so there's no naming convention to really worry about except for desktop machines. Once we start getting into Windows 7 installation, you're going to see naming convention for these machines in action. The network details for the Utica, New York Small Regional Office that's used for this scenario are as follows. It's the same IP address range, except there's a 7 now instead of a 5 or a 6. Making 172.16.7.1 through 172.16.7.254 the IP address range for the Utica, New York office. Again, we're using a 24-bit subnet mask, and the gateway address, which is the firewall router combination for the Utica office, is 172.16.7.254. Since small regional offices don't have their own servers, they rely on the headquarters DNS server to be able to do DNS lookups to get out to the internet. As such, the DNS server for the Utica, New York office is 172.16.5.1. And now you're looking at a corporate network diagram for Global Mantix, specifically focused on the sites that we're going to use for the Windows 7 pilot project. At the top of each box, you're going to notice that there are the overall general network details that have to do with each site. The network address for this is 172.16.5.0, and as you can see, all of the addresses here are 172.16.5 addresses. There are 4 servers that are loaded at Fort Global Mantix corporate headquarters. The first one is GMDC, which is the Global Mantix domain controller for headquarters. It runs Windows Server 2008 R2, and it also houses the DNS server role. Global Mantix uses the domain name globalmantix.com, and this is also the name of the Active Directory domain that's in use by Global Mantix. There are some other servers as well. GM-Remote is used for remote access. GM File is used for file and print services. And GM General is used for some other general purposes at Global Mantix. We will be using GM General later on in this course. The inside firewall address for Global Mantix headquarters is, I mentioned before, 172.16.5.254. The outside address is 192.168.10.5. This will make a little bit more sense when we get to a physical network diagram later on in this lesson. So don't worry about this too much right now, and you'll see where I'm coming from, why I chose these addresses. Likewise, the Southwest Regional Office starts out with a 192.168 address as well for its outside firewall. And as we move up the stack, we see that we have a firewall inside address, some desktop and laptop addresses as well. And then we have the Southwest Office file server, which is 172.16.6.1. In this case, the file server role at each of the regional offices also houses the DNS server. So you're going to see that this server is running both file and DNS services. And here's some network information. The small regional offices don't have their own file servers. So as we mentioned before, these offices, and as you can see here, these offices are dependent on GM-DC for their DNS needs. And here's the firewall. 7.254 is the inside address with an outside address of 10.7, 192.168.10.7. Now, if we were looking at every single Global Mantix corporate office, this little purple line would continue on, and you would see quite a few more of these boxes. But as I mentioned, Global Mantix is going to use these as templates and then just apply these as cookie cutters to all of the other sites. That'll ease simplicity and make this a much more efficient rollout of a new operating system. And now for a look at my hardware setup that I'll be using to help you learn Windows 7 administration so that Global Mantix can have the best possible Windows 7 rollout. For this course, the various servers and Windows 7 workstations that we're using are all virtual machines. They're running in Windows Server 2008 R2 data center machine running under Hyper-V R2. As you may know, Hyper-V is a virtualization platform that competes with VMware ESX. The Hyper-V R2 server, this Windows Server 2008 data center server that I'm using, is a Dell PowerEdge 2950 with 32 gigabytes of RAM, dual quad-core Xeon processors, and just under a terabyte of disk space in a RAID 5 configuration. It's a pretty beefy server, but we'll be running a number of virtual machines. So if you're planning on following along, try to get a server that has similar characteristics. If you can't, a single quad-core processor will likely be fine, and a little less RAM is fine as well. If you can even get 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, you should be just fine. You'll have to allocate a little less RAM to the virtual machines, but you will be able to follow along. And you also don't need a terabyte of disk space. This server just happens to have that much. I would estimate you would need 1 to 200 gigs of space at most. Now, each Global Mantic site is connected on a separate network adapter in the Hyper-V R2 server. That is, the headquarters site is on its own network adapter. All the virtual machines having to do with the Southwest regional site are on their own network adapter. And all the machines having to do with secondary sites are on their own network adapter as well. Each network adapter from my Hyper-V R2 server is actually connected to a firewall and then to my lab/home network. You're going to get a map of this whole thing in just a minute, and this is going to clear up what's probably a lot of mud right now, but that's okay. Each one of the individual servers that you're seeing in this course, GM-File, GM-DC, what have you, are running Windows Server 2008 R2 RTM, the release the manufacturing version of Windows Server 2008 R2. Every server has a gig of RAM assigned to it. I've got plenty of RAM in my Hyper-V server, so it didn't make sense to not give them enough RAM. Windows Server 2008 R2 is available on a 180-day trial basis, and you can load as many copies of this as you like. The link is on your screen. I had a very specific goal in mind when I created this lab for this course, to mimic as closely as possible a real-world multi-site environment. Now, obviously, most corporations don't have gig links between their sites, and neither does Global Mantic. And in my case, I do because I'm running it on my home network. However, that won't affect how the entire environment actually operates. By the end of the course, you should actually get a feeling that you are working with a real-world multi-site environment just because of the way that everything is created in my home lab. And what you're looking at now is my physical lab configuration. As I mentioned, I'm running a 2950 from Dell with these characteristics. It has an 8-core machine, pretty beefy processors, lots of RAM, and it's Hyper-V R2. Starting from the right, I have a container that is just my small regional offices, their desktops, and their laptops. And they're connected to a NIC that has the address 172.16.7.253. From that network adapter, we are connecting to a firewall with an IP address of 172.16.7.254 with an outside firewall address of 192.168.10.7. You probably recognize these addresses if you were looking at the previous diagram in this lesson. These are the same addresses that you saw on the logical network diagram that gave you an overview of what the Global Mantic corporate network looks like. Likewise, the large regional office virtual machines, their file server, and their desktops are running with this on a network adapter with this IP address, 172.16.6.253. And again, they're connected to their own firewall. Further, the headquarters network is configured in a similar way. And then finally, I have sort of a catch-all, which is the front-end Hyper-V server management network. But that's what we're going to use for everything else. All of the mobile workers and anything else that's outside of one of the regional offices or the headquarters network will run on virtual machines that are attached to the front-end NIC for the Hyper-V server. And again, this will actually mimic a real-world environment. When a machine from here needs to get a DNS address from HQ, the traffic will actually come out the network and hit the GM-DC domain controller. So it will operate as we would expect. The purple line here is my home network, and that's where the 192.168.10.5 comes in. My router has an IP address of 192.168.0.1, and it has a 16-bit subnet mask. So I'm using 255.255.0.0 for a subnet mask on my home network, allowing all of these addresses to coexist. And as you can see here, 192.168.0.197 is an address on my network, as are the three of these, and I have a number of other computers in my home that use the same IP addresses. And from there, we go out to the internet. So what you're seeing is basically a very high-level overview of the physical lab configuration that I'll be using throughout this course. This is not the last time you're going to see this. At various points throughout the course, I'm going to bring this back up so that we can make sure that there's an understanding of exactly how the network traffic is flowing for a particular task. Some of that's critically important, particularly with things like branch cache and direct access, which are two new features in Windows 7 that you're going to learn about in this course. And that wraps up this lesson in the Windows 7 administration course.